At the Hello for Good symposium on homelessness a few years ago, the theme was around the idea that Housing First had potentially become a failure actually in the United States. What is Housing First, and why do some think that it's actually failed?
Housing First is the idea that if someone is homeless and they're struggling with behavioral health issues, mental health, addiction, you name it, you really can't fix those other medical problems until you get a safe roof over their head, till they have a key to a front door and they know they have a place to sleep that night. And the idea is, let's get everyone inside, let's get them in a shelter, let's get them in an apartment, and then once they're in there, let's give them the services they need to stabilize and stop harming themselves. That's Housing First. The reality is, you will hear a lot, Housing First is a failure. And you'll see the same bar charts that you saw at that symposium you're talking about, where they say, okay, Housing First started in the 90s in the US, and since the 90s, homelessness has exploded. So as you've built more Housing First, homelessness has gone up. The data there is just all backwards. There's so many reasons why homelessness has gone up since the 90s. We've talked about them. Lack of housing, lack of affordable housing, raising in rents, mental health, addiction, all of it. People losing their jobs during the recession. All those things made homelessness go up. The idea that building Housing First is why homelessness went up and hence Housing First is a failure is nonsensical and illogical. It would be the same thing as if you said, well, you know why there's so much more cancer in the US since 1990? It's because we've built more hospitals. It's silliness. Building more housing is not making homelessness go up. It's just, although that sounds really attractive to people of a certain ideological bent, and it's a great thing to say why we should stop building housing for the homeless, it's simply not true. The data does not support that statement that Housing First is a failure. Now, that being said, Housing First is done differently all over this country. And the reality is, the way we do Housing First at Catholic Charities is we build a building and then we fill it with staff, mental health, substance abuse, life skills counselors, peer counselors, people who have been formerly homeless themselves, property management, maintenance, security, all those in one building. You don't have to do it that way. There are some Housing First projects that take a homeless person off the street, give them a key to their new apartment and say, good luck, and there's no one in the building. As you could imagine, that building turns into chaos pretty quickly. Our buildings do not on the inside because we have all that staff. On the outside, there may be a group of people trying to get in, trying to prey on our people. They can't get in, but they hang out there and make everything look scary to someone who's driving by. But the reality is, if you go in the building, you're going to see clean, safe, people getting services, people getting better, people getting clean and sober. Does it work every single time? No. But our Housing First in Spokane has a 93% success rate. That's measured by HUD, and the success is measured by, once you move in from the shelter or the street into this apartment, are you still in that stable housing 2 years later? If yes, you're a success. If no, it's a failure. The national average for Housing First for success is about 40%, a little less than half the time. We get 93% because we put the precious presence in the building, all those staff. Not everyone does that. Not every Housing First provider does that. But we do, and most in Spokane do. But are they doing that in New York City and Chicago? Maybe not. And those buildings are becoming a little bit spicy? They definitely are. If we didn't have the staff in these buildings, it would be very hard to manage. Thankfully, we have the staff. So Housing First is not a failure. The data does not show that. And I think it's important that the think tanks that put this data together that say Housing First is a failure, they are all from a political ideological bent. They are trying to convince the federal government to stop funding homelessness. So they put together these reports saying Housing First is a failure. Homelessness has gone up since we started building it. Homelessness has gone up for 10 other reasons. Housing First, building housing is not one of them.